Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA Karen stories. In this video, a power-hungry HOA president makes a fatal mistake. She tells an entire neighborhood that they can park on a rancher's private property without his permission. When 12 cars get towed during the 4th of July party and angry residents have to pay $150 each to get them back, the situation takes a turn. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. Today we will read two amazing HOA stories, but the first one is titled HOA designated my ranch as public HOA parking spot, claiming I'm a member but I never joined. So I own a fairly large ranch property in a transitional area, so partially suburb and partially rural. My land is annoyingly right on the border, so when there are issues, I tend to be the only rancher in the area that has these issues. I just want peace and to take care of my animals most of the time. I do know about the HOA that controls the suburb next to me, especially the woman that runs it, but trust me, I will get to her in a second. First, I just want to say that the HOA kind of freaks me out. All the homes being kinda the same just gives me the vibe like everybody's a robot or something. Since I'm not in the HOA, you would think that I have nothing to do with, well, anything. And yeah, I've had some minor run-ins with the HOA, but not the president. It was others that were telling me things like how my fence was the wrong color or random stuff like that. Once they realized I was not in the HOA though, they all backed off and apologized. I can understand misunderstandings, so I don't hold a grudge or hate them for any of that. Now, the president Karen? Yeah, she's enough to make anybody hate an entire HOA. Karen, despite not having any direct run-ins with me, was notorious and I knew who she was. She was loud, overbearing, and seemed to take everything as a personal challenge to her authority. I'd heard stories from neighbors about her going after people for having their garbage cans out an hour too early or demanding people repaint their mailboxes because they were slightly off the approved color. I guess when they were building homes, they did not want any house directly against the ranch, so instead my neighbor is the community clubhouse. Basically, a fancy place where they hold meetings and other events. One thing to note is that the parking space available at the clubhouse is extremely limited. Whoever built it did not plan well or assumed everybody would just want to walk, which clearly didn't happen. Well, several big events happen every year. Basically, every big holiday they are doing something and it gets crowded. And when it gets crowded, parking space runs out and people are parking on the nearby streets, blocking driveways, or even parking in people's yards without permission. It's a total chaos every single time. On a few occasions I've had people politely ask me if they could park in the field that is next to the parking lot. I've always told them no and explained it's where I keep equipment and that my livestock uses that area. Most people were understanding, though a few seemed annoyed. I know quite a few of their neighbors, and while some are snobby, most seem nice and respectful when they are not being influenced by HOA drama. And well, the 4th of July party was coming up in a few weeks and I was already dreading another parking disaster. That is when I got an extremely formal looking letter in the mail from the HOA. The only credit I will probably give to the HOA in this story is that they picked some nice fancy letterhead. The letter was claiming that in the original neighborhood development plan, my land was designated as auxiliary community space for HOA events. It continued by telling me that I was obligated to facilitate community harmony and let people park in my field during the upcoming 4th of July event and all future events. They even included a clause from some old development document that was honestly pretty vague. The clause basically said that any underutilized space within the community boundaries could be designated for so-called community benefit during special events. Well, the key issue for me was my land is not underutilized, I use it for my animals and equipment, and number two, I was never part of their community boundaries to begin with. I didn't know how I wanted to approach the situation, since I'm not really the bust in and start yelling kind of guy. I had a couple of weeks to figure it out, so I spent a few days thinking and doing some research. I guess it was too long because I got a letter from Karen herself asking if I had gotten the letter. Me, I did, and I looked it over. There are a couple of things I actually want to go over with you about this. Karen, you don't need to worry about any of the details. We will handle setting up the cones and directing traffic. It will be very organized. Me, no, that's not what I'm concerned about. I don't want anybody parking in my field at all. Karen, I sent you the development clause. Your property falls within the community HOA planning area, so you're part of this whether you realized it or not. It's right there in black and white. Me, all I know is that I own my land free and clear, and I don't need to let anybody use my private property. If you want to set up additional parking within the actual HOA boundaries, you can do that, but not on my land. Karen, look, just do the neighborly thing here. People want to come and celebrate the 4th of July. We're not asking you to contribute money or volunteer your time. Me, and I'm telling you no. It is my private property and I use that field for my livestock and equipment storage. Karen, well, we're gonna proceed according to the development plan. We have our rights too. Me, well, if you do that, I promise I will exercise my property rights. After that call, I decided I better double check that I was actually in the right legally. I went to the county clerk's office, and after waiting in line for what felt like forever, I finally got some help from a clerk who walked me through how to look up property records and development documents. Lots of boring paperwork later, the situation was clear. I had zero legal obligations to the HOA. The development clause they referenced only applied to properties that were actually part of the HOA subdivision, which mine was not. I sent the HOA board an email with scanned copies of the relevant county records, clearly explaining that my land was not part of the development and was private property. I also told them that if they had anybody park on my property, I would have those cars towed at the owner's expense, and included the contact info for the towing company I'd already spoken with. Karen replied to my email, copying the whole board, saying that I was being difficult and that they would proceed as planned because they knew their rights and responsibilities. She also made some snide comment about how real neighbors help each other out. 2 days before the event, I saw Karen herself out in my field with orange cones clearly marking out parking spaces. I went out to talk to her. Me, Karen, what are you doing? And by the way, guys, if some HOA Karen decided that your property is now suddenly a public HOA parking spot, what would you have done in this situation? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. A comment would also help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Karen said, setting up the overflow parking like I told you we would. Me, on my property, which I told you I would have towed. We will see about that. At this point, I had a few choices. I could have put up a fence or barriers, but that would cost me money and time for Karen's problem. I could have put up a bunch of no parking signs, but I had a feeling that they would just get ignored or removed. Instead, I decided to follow through on exactly what I'd want them I would do. I called the towing company I'd already spoken with, and they specialize in private property towing and had actually dealt with HOA disputes before. The guy I talked to said that July 4th was always busy for them, but if I could guarantee there would be multiple cars to tow, he could have one truck on standby that evening. We worked out that I would call when cars started showing up and they would come out. If nobody actually parked there, I would call and let them know so they could handle other calls. The day of the event arrived, and sure enough, the official parking lot was full within about 20 minutes of the starting time. People started parking along the street, and then I saw the first car pull into my field right where Karen had put her cones. I went outside and tried to tell the driver they couldn't park there, but they pointed to the cones and said the HOA lady told them it was overflow parking. I explained it was my private property, but they seemed to think I was just being difficult. 3 more cars followed before I gave up trying to reason with people individually. Time to make the call. The tow truck driver said he would be there in about 15 minutes, which was perfect timing since more cars were still arriving. The music from the event was pretty loud and people were either inside the clubhouse or gathered around the food table, so nobody really noticed when the first car got hooked up and towed away. By the time the tow truck came back for the second car, a few people had started to notice, but Karen must have been busy inside because she wasn't around to see what was happening. It was not until the third car was getting loaded up that Karen finally came storming over. Karen, what do you think you're doing? You cannot just steal people's cars. Me, I'm not stealing anything. I'm having cars towed from my private property. Exactly like I told you I would. Karen to the tow truck driver, you need to stop this right now. This is community property. Tow truck driver, ma'am, I've got the property records here. This is his land and he's got every right to have cars towed. Karen tried arguing with the driver some more, but he ignored her and finished loading up the car. By this point, a small crowd had gathered and Karen was getting more and more flustered, trying to explain to people what was happening while also trying to get the towing to stop. The fourth and fifth cars caused a bigger scene because their owners came out just as they were being hooked up. There was some yelling and confusion, but I made sure to loudly explain to everyone who would listen that I had warned the HOA this would happen, that this was my private property and that they could take it up with Karen and the HOA board. One guy got pretty angry and wanted to know why Karen had told everyone it was okay to park there if it wasn't actually HOA property. And well, Karen's explanation kept changing. First it was that I was being unreasonable, then it was that there was a misunderstanding about the property boundaries, and by the time it was all said and done, 12 cars had been towed already. The tow truck driver said he could have stayed longer, but it was getting late and he had other calls to do. Honestly, most people had figured out what was happening by then and either moved their cars themselves or found street parking, even though that meant a longer walk. During all of this, Karen was not handling it well. She kept threatening to call the police and talk about lawsuits, but when I offered to show her the same county records I'd emailed to the board, she didn't want to look at them. A couple of other board members had shown up by then, and they seemed pretty unhappy when they found out about the email I had sent that apparently none of them had seen. The aftermath was interesting. The people who got their cars towed had to pay around $150 each to get them back, and they were understandably upset. Most of them seemed to understand that I had warned the HOA, but they still weren't happy about having to pay. Karen tried to spin it as me being a bad neighbor, but the other board members were not buying it, especially when they found out that she had never shared my email with them and had gone ahead with the parking plan anyway. It took about 2 weeks, but Karen ended up getting voted out of her position. From what I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain, it wasn't just because of the parking incident though. Apparently there had been other issues with her not communicating with the rest of the board and making unilateral decisions. The parking thing was just the final straw. The new board president actually came by my house a few days after taking over. She apologized for the whole situation and assured me that they understood my property was private and off limits, and she also mentioned that they were looking into expanding the actual clubhouse parking lot, though that would probably take a while to get approved and funded. Interestingly though, they didn't offer to reimburse people for the towing fees. I heard there was some debate about it at a board meeting, but ultimately they decided that since people were told by Karen to park there against the property's owner's wishes, it was not the HOA's responsibility to pay for the consequences. The next HOA event a few months later was back to the usual chaos of people scrambling for street parking, but not a single person parked in my field. I did end up putting up a couple of private property no parking signs just to make things crystal clear, and I've never had a problem since. Looking back, I'm not sure if I handled everything perfectly. Part of me wonders if I should have tried harder to work something out, maybe offered to let them use a different part of my property that wouldn't interfere with my animals, or charge them a fee for the inconvenience. On the other hand, I feel like if I had given in after they tried to just steamroll over my property rights, it would have set a precedent for every future event. The whole thing definitely caused some drama in the neighborhood. Some people think I was totally justified, others think I could have been more flexible, and a few people are still mad about having to pay towing fees even though they understand it was not technically my fault. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for having cars towed from my private property after warning the HOA I would do exactly that? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP was an a-hole here? I think OP absolutely did the right thing, and the entitled HOA members got exactly what they deserved. I wish the towing fee would have been higher though. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. You literally gave them multiple warnings, you sent documentation, you told them exactly what would happen, they chose to ignore you and found out the hard way. Karen played stupid games and won stupid prizes. Don't mess with people's private property, especially when they've been crystal clear about the consequences. Comment number 2, everyone sucks here. Karen was definitely wrong and overstepped big time, but you could have handled this better. You knew innocent people would get caught up in this and have to pay money they shouldn't have to pay. Maybe you could have put up temporary fencing or more visible signs first. The car owners are the real victims here. And yeah guys, not sure if I agree with that. Comment number 3, you're the a-hole. I cannot believe how many people think this is okay. You knew regular people would have to pay $150 they couldn't afford just to prove a point to Karen. You could have found a dozen other ways to handle this that didn't involve screwing over innocent neighbors. This was petty revenge disguised as property rights. And yeah guys, indeed this was petty revenge, and it was 100% deserved. Normal people don't park on other people's private property, especially when it is so clear. Comment number 4, everyone sucks here but leaning NTA. Karen was absolutely in the wrong, but I think you missed some opportunities for better solutions. What if you had charged a small parking fee, like $10 per car for the evening? That way you get compensated for the use of your land, the HOA gets their parking, and nobody gets towed. Sometimes the right solution is not the best solution for everyone involved. And now guys, let's move on to the next HOA story of the video, which is, to be honest, even crazier, and it is titled HOA insists my sister and I are not a single-family household and tries to force us out of our own property. Posted on r/legaladvice. So I'm 21 and my sister is 19. We have lived in this house our entire lives. Our parents bought this house 27 years ago and they joined the HOA about 15 years ago. My dad died 5 years ago and my mom died 6 months ago. We are now the owners of this house and we've been visited by the HOA multiple times. They are citing that we are not a single family home anymore since our mom has died. They told us that according to the HOA terms, only a single family can be resident in the homes, and being single family is defined as a person or couple and their legal unmarried children. This meant that my mom could live with me and my sister as it was a single family according to the definition, but me and my sister living here after our mom's death means we are two families of single adults. They want one of us to move out so that this place becomes a single family home again. They have visited us 4 times now, asking us to leave. They say they don't like to sue us out of respect for our parents, but they will do that if we continue to refuse to comply by the community rules. Can they really kick one of us out of our own house? What should we expect and how can we fight this? A user in the comments said, according to what terms? The HOA defines family in their covenants? Because I'm pretty sure the state of Washington has a different definition that's gonna be more important. Standard statement on HOAs. HOAs can be powerful, however all of that power is based on the HOA being able to successfully sue and acquire judgments against you. That requires time, energy and money. Unless the HOA is sitting on a war chest, that's gonna be an issue. Edit, if it becomes important, RCW 2650-010, defining family or household members. Comment number 2, sounds like someone in your neighborhood wants to force you out so they can buy your house. I call BS on their part. Comment number 3, I didn't see this at first, but you said the house did not have an HOA when it was bought. I wonder if the HOA is not mandatory, but was an option your parents agreed to. Check the deed to the house and covenants, could be as simple as withdrawing from the HOA. And now we got an update to the story that goes like this. So I posted here a few weeks ago about my HOA situation. Well, things have escalated significantly since my last post and I need to know what my options are because this is getting insane. So after I posted initially, I took some of the advice and requested copies of all the HOA documents, and what I found was interesting. So the HOA was not even established until 2009, which was 12 years after my parents bought the house in 1997. My parents were basically forced to join when the majority of neighbors voted to create the HOA, and the single-family restriction was part of the original 2009 covenants. But here's where it gets messy. I also discovered that 3 other houses in our neighborhood have similar situations: adult siblings living together or adult children living with elderly parents who are not their legal guardians. The fact is, the HOA has never bothered any of them. Last Tuesday, the HOA president, this woman who moved in just 2 years ago, showed up at our door again. This time she brought 2 other board members with her. "We've been more than patient with you too," she said, not even bothering with pleasantries. "We gave you time to grieve, but it's been 6 months since your mother passed. One of you needs to go." My sister was home this time and she's not as diplomatic as I try to be. "This is our house," she said. "We're not going anywhere." "Actually, it's not your house," one of the board members chimed in. "It's part of this community and community rules apply to everyone equally." I tried to stay calm. "Well, can you show me exactly where in the covenant it says that adult siblings cannot live together? Because I've read through everything and the language is pretty vague." The HOA president pulled out a folder. "Right here, section 4.2 clearly states that each residence must be occupied by a single family unit defined as a person or married couple and their legal unmarried children under the age of 25. You two are not children of anyone currently residing in this home." "But we are related," my sister argued. "We are family." "Not according to this definition," the woman snapped. "Look, we don't want to be the bad guys here. Your parents were wonderful people, but rules are rules. We have 3 options. One of you moves out voluntarily, you sell the house to a qualifying family, or we begin legal proceedings to force compliance." And that is when I lost it a little. You're seriously gonna sue 2 orphans out of their childhood home over some technicality? It's not a technicality, she replied coldly. It's a covenant violation. We have a responsibility to all homeowners to maintain property values and community standards. Having multiple unrelated adults living in a single-family home sets a precedent we cannot allow. We are not unrelated, my sister shouted. We are siblings. Legally, you're 2 separate adults with no dependent relationship, the third board member said. The covenant is clear. After they left, I did some more digging and I found out that this HOA president bought her house specifically because she liked the family-oriented community standards. She's apparently been pushing for stricter enforcement of various rules since she joined the board last year. Here's the kicker though. I also discovered that her own adult son lived with her for 8 months last year after his divorce. When I brought this up to one of our neighbors, they confirmed it but said the HOA never considered it a violation because he was her son. So I decided to fight back. I hired a lawyer, had to dip into the small inheritance we got to afford it, but I figured it was worth it. My attorney, let's call him Mr. Davis, reviewed all the documents and was immediately interested in the case. This is actually more complex than it appears. He told me during our first meeting, the covenant language is ambiguous and there's a strong argument that siblings have a family relationship that should qualify under a reasonable interpretation of single family. He also pointed out something crucial, the HOA's selective enforcement. If they've allowed other family situations that technically violate their interpretation but are targeting you specifically, that could constitute discriminatory enforcement. Mr. Davis sent a formal response to the HOA, basically telling them to back off and point out legal issues with their position. He also requested documentation of how they've handled similar situations with other residents. The HOA's response was swift and aggressive. Within a week, we received a formal notice of covenant violation with a 30-day cure period. They were demanding either compliance or the start of legal proceedings. They are calling your bluff, Mr. Davis said when I showed him the notice, but they may have overplayed their hand. And that is when things got really interesting. Mr. Davis did some research and found that our state actually has specific protections for inherited family homes. There's a statute that prevents HOAs from forcing the sale of inherited property based solely on family composition, especially when the residents are related by blood. He also discovered that the HOA's own interpretation of single family might be legally problematic. In our state, family relationships extend beyond just parent-child relationships, and siblings living together have been consistently recognized as a family unit by the courts. We are going to challenge this on multiple fronts, he explained. Discriminatory enforcement, ambiguous covenant language, state inheritance protections, and the fundamental right to family association. But the HOA wasn't backing down. 2 weeks ago, they filed an actual lawsuit against us in county court, seeking an injunction to force one of us to move out, demanding their legal fees. Reading that lawsuit was terrifying. They were asking the court to declare us in violation of the covenants and to order us to cure the violation within 60 days or face daily fines of $100 until compliance. They also wanted us to pay their attorney fees, which would be thousands of dollars. My sister cried when she read it. "They're really trying to kick us out of our home," she said. "Where am I supposed to go? I'm still in college. I cannot afford to rent somewhere else." That night, I barely slept. The house felt different somehow, like it wasn't really ours anymore. Every creak and sound made me think about losing the place where we grew up, where our parents' memories live in every room, but Mr. Davis was confident. "This lawsuit actually helps us," he said. "Now we can countersue for harassment, discriminatory enforcement, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We can also demand discovery of how they've handled every other resident situation." Through legal requests, we found out that the HOA has ignored multiple covenant violations by other residents, including a house where an adult daughter moved back with her 2 young children after a divorce, technically creating a multi-generational situation, a home where elderly parents live with their adult son and his girlfriend, which should violate their unmarried adults restriction, and a property where college-aged siblings of the homeowner have been living for over a year while attending university. None of these situations resulted in violation notices or legal action. We also discovered something really damaging to their case. The HOA president had specifically told other board members in an email that she wanted to clean up the neighborhood and that young people without proper supervision were bad for property values. Her emails clearly showed that she was targeting us specifically because of our age and the fact that we don't have parental supervision. This is discrimination based on age and family status, Mr. Davis explained. And it's exactly what we needed to prove selective enforcement. The other major development was that we found an ally. Mrs. Johnson, who has lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and sits on the HOA board, reached out to us privately. She was apparently horrified by how the president was handling our situation and had been the only board member voting against a legal action. "Your parents were wonderful neighbors," she told us when she stopped by. "This whole thing is ridiculous. You kids belong in this house and most of the neighborhood agrees." She also revealed that the HOA president had been pushing several unpopular changes, that there was growing opposition to her leadership. Several residents were planning to attend the next board meeting to voice their support for us. That meeting was last Thursday and it was intense. The community room was packed. Apparently, word had gotten around about our situation. My sister and I sat in the back feeling awkward but grateful for the support. One by one, neighbors stood up to speak during the open comment period. "These kids have been through enough," said Mr. Moore from down the street. "They lost both parents and now you want to take their home too? That is not the kind of community I want to live in." Mrs. Aberdeen, whose own adult children visit frequently, pointed out the hypocrisy. "If we're gonna enforce rules, let's enforce them fairly for everyone, but targeting two orphan children is just cruel." Even some people I didn't know well spoke up. The overall message was clear: the community thought the HOA was wrong to pursue this. The HOA president tried to maintain that they were just enforcing the rules fairly, but several residents called her out on the selective enforcement issue. When Mrs. Johnson read some of the president's emails about cleaning up the neighborhood, the room got pretty hostile. By the end of the meeting, 2 other board members had publicly stated that they wanted to drop the lawsuit and work out a solution. The president was clearly rattled, but she was still pushing forward. Yesterday, we got notice that they are refusing to settle and want to go to trial. Mr. Davis thinks this is actually good news for us. "The more unreasonable they appear, the better it is for our case," he said, "and with the community support you have, plus the evidence of discriminatory enforcement, I think we are in a strong position." He has also found precedent cases in our state where courts have ruled that siblings constitute a family unit and that HOA covenants must be interpreted reasonably to allow for different family structures. But I'm still stressed about the whole thing. A trial means more legal fees, more uncertainty, and more time before this gets resolved. It also means the possibility, however small, that we could lose. My sister is handling it better than I am now. "We are not giving up our home," she said last night. "Mom and Dad would want us to fight for it." And she's right. I'm exhausted though. Between dealing with the lawsuit, finishing my senior year of college, and working part-time to help pay the bills, I feel like I am drowning. The trial is scheduled for next month. Mr. Davis is preparing our defense and our counterclaims. He is confident we'll win, especially with the evidence of selective enforcement and the community support we have. However, I need to know, what should I realistically expect at trial? Are there any other legal strategies we should consider? And if we do win, can we recover our legal fees from the HOA? Also, is there anything I should be doing now to protect ourselves? The HOA president seems pretty vindictive, and I'm worried she might try other ways to make our lives difficult. Any advice would be appreciated. This whole situation has been a nightmare, and I just want it to be over so my sister and I can grieve our parents and move on with our lives in the home they left us. Update number 2. Well, I promised I would update everyone on how this turned out, and I'm happy to say it's finally over. So the trial never actually happened. About 2 weeks before the court date, the HOA's attorney apparently advised them that their case was very weak and they should settle. The settlement negotiations were quick once they started. The HOA agreed to drop all claims against us and acknowledge our right to live in the house as siblings, pay our legal fees, about $8,000 total, and revise their covenant language to clearly allow family members, including adult siblings, to live together. Also issue a written apology for their overzealous enforcement. But the best part was what happened to the HOA board level. Well, the community had gotten so upset about how this was handled that they called a special election to remove the president from the board. She lost by a huge margin and ended up putting her house on the market 2 weeks later. Also, a new, more reasonable HOA president got elected. One of the things she did was establish clearer guidelines for covenant enforcement that focus on actual community problems rather than technicalities about family composition. The whole neighborhood dynamic has actually improved since this happened. People seem more connected and supportive of each other. Several neighbors have told us they are glad we fought back because it forced the community to think about what kind of place they want to live in. My sister and I are doing much better now. We've been able to focus on healing from our parents' death without the constant stress of potentially losing our home. My sister and I are finally able to move forward with our lives in the home our parents wanted us to have. That's all we ever wanted, and I'm grateful we didn't give up the fight. Thanks to everyone who offered advice and support during this process. This community really helped us get through one of the hardest times in our lives.